Picture yourself back in 2005. You've got this brilliant idea for an online marketplace that connects local farmers with buyers. You sketch it out, you approach a software development company, and they hit you with a code that makes your jaw drop. We're talking serious money and close to a year to build. Now cut to 2025. You have a similar idea, but instead of hiring developers just to build a prototype, you open up your laptop on Monday, and by Friday you are testing a basic and functional version, built entirely without writing a single line of code. That right there, that's the core idea of no-code. What started as basic web page builders in the mid-90s has quietly evolved into platforms that can create complex applications. Some are even powered by AI. And the most exciting part, well, applications can now be built simply by describing what you want in plain English. Just imagine telling your computer, create an app that tracks my expenses, or create a dashboard for my online store, and it actually builds it for you. Today, no-code is an industry worth about $36 billion, and it is projected to dominate software development by 2030. From individuals to big companies, organizations are using these tools to build applications faster and save on development costs. So how did we get here? What can these platforms really do? And most importantly, how can you leverage this movement for your own ideas, your career, or your business? Stay tuned because today we're looking into that. I'm Hamid Nach and welcome to a new episode of eCompass. So what exactly is no-code? Well, imagine you want to build an app, but you can't write a single line of code. With no-code platforms, you don't actually need to. You simply use a virtual interface. You drag and drop elements like a button or a form, and voila. It's visual, it's intuitive, and there is no programming required. So now let's outline what makes it different from what's called low code. With low code, you get those same visual tools, but here's the thing, you still need to write a little bit of code for custom features or if you want to make complex integrations. So naturally, you're going to need some knowledge of basic programming for that. And then, of course, there is the pro code. That basically refers to the traditional way of writing everything from scratch using programming languages like .NET, Python, or JavaScript. Traditional coding is powerful, sure, but it often takes years to master. This complexity is exactly the problem that no-code aims to solve. What's really compelling about no-code is that it opens up software development to everyone, whether you are a marketing manager or small business owner or just someone with a great idea. Now let's go back in time. The story of no-code begins in the 90s, right in the early days of the internet. The web was on the rise and suddenly everyone wanted a website, but few knew HTML. You may remember platforms like GeoCities, for example. These allowed anyone to build a personal web page using simple visual editors and templates. Then on the professional side, legacy tools like Microsoft FrontPage provided WYSIWYG editors. WYSIWYG stands for what you see is what you get, which means users can create websites visually, while the software handles all the code behind the scenes. This was really the first taste of no-code for everyday people, even though it was mainly focused on building fairly simple static websites back then. Alright, so then as the web really started to mature in the early 2000s, people weren't just happy with static pages anymore. They wanted dynamic web applications, sites that could actually do things. And that's really when content management systems like WordPress started to appear. Take WordPress, for example. It began as a blogging platform, but pretty quickly it evolved into a tool for building entire dynamic websites. And the interesting thing was eventually even non-technical people could manage all their website contents without ever having to touch a single line of code. The 2010 brought the next evolution. No-code started to shift from just those early website builders to actually tackling serious app development. Take Zapier, for example. It launched back in 2011, and suddenly anyone could automate workflows between different apps without writing a single line of code. Cloud computing was a huge driver for all this. Think about it. With the cloud, there were no servers to manage, no complicated setup to deal with. So from 2022 onward, no-code really evolved dramatically with AI integration. Large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, and DeepSeek became the new interface for how you create software. So instead of having to drag and drop components or connect parts, you can just describe what you want in plain English or whatever language you speak, and the AI actually goes ahead and generates the application for you. Platforms like Cursor, Lovable, Windsurf, and Bolt, they allow you to describe the features you want, and then the AI assists in generating the structure, the design, and how it all works. This whole approach, they're calling it vibe coding. And that term was actually coined by Andrej Karpathy, one of the co-founders of OpenAI. So picture this. Traditional no-code platforms, they require you to drag and drop and configure every single element. But vibe coding, that takes a completely different approach. Instead of you assembling pre-made components, you simply describe what you want to create. You could just say something like, hey, I need a landing page with a compelling hero section. Make sure to add some customer testimonials, and I need a contact form that automatically saves any responses to a spreadsheet. And then the AI takes the description and translates it into a working code. I mean, this shifts everything. Suddenly, English or your natural language becomes your programming language. So really what you can build now boils down to how well you can articulate your ideas and goals, and basically how good you are at writing an effective prompt for the AI. So what does this all really mean? Well, it basically means that app creation becomes accessible to pretty much anyone with a vision. And yeah, vibe coding is definitely here to stay. So get this, by 2030, industry analysts are predicting that 80 to 90% of code at leading firms could be AI generated. That's a huge jump from only about 20 to 30% back in the mid-2020s. And the market for these AI-assisted coding tools is just expanding. It was valued at $6.7 billion in 2024, and it is projected to reach $25.7 billion by 2030. Now, this doesn't mean that human programmers are going to disappear. Not at all. Rather, their roles are going to evolve. Think of it like this. They will go from being coders to more like AI orchestrators. So instead of manually producing every single function, developers will be the one defining the problems, crafting those smart prompts, and then integrating the AI-generated modules. And what does it mean actually for the tech world? Well, it's pretty remarkable. Actually, companies are discovering they can build applications with much smaller teams. We're talking 6 to 8 people instead of 15 or 20. And here's something to note. One of every 4 startups that just went through the Y Combinator's winter program, they had their code almost completely generated by AI. For entrepreneurs, what used to take months is now happening in weeks. That whole barrier between the prototype and the actual product has essentially disappeared. We're also seeing the rise of citizen developers. These are the people who can build their own applications without having to wait around for the IT department. But let's be real here for a second. Vibe coding isn't some magic wand that just solves every single problem. Performance, for instance, can be a real challenge. Sure, your app may work great when you've got 10 people using it, but what happens when that number hits 1,000 or 10,000? Chances are you might still need to understand the fundamentals of programming to really scale that app properly. Then there is security. Think about it. When you're not writing the code yourself, you're basically trusting the AI to keep your data safe. For industries with strict regulations, like healthcare or finance, this can be a major hurdle. Vibe coders, even with these tools, still need to understand software security basics, like how to secure an API and manage user permissions, for example. And for our organizations, there's this challenge called shadow IT. That's basically when different departments start building their own applications without really telling anyone. It sounds harmless, but it can create all sorts of security and compliance issues down the line. There's also this kind of false sense of simplicity. Just because the tools are easier to use doesn't mean the thinking behind it all gets simpler. Vibe coding still requires you to think critically about what problems you're actually trying to solve, what data you're using, and whether the results you're getting even make sense. And here's something that often gets overlooked. Teams can become so dependent on these tools that they might actually lose the ability to think through the problems themselves. When the AI gives you a faulty result, you need to have the skills to spot it and fix it. So the bottom line is this. Organizations really need to invest in AI literacy across the entire workforce. These tools are incredibly powerful, no doubt, but they are not perfect. So where is all this actually heading? Well, the future of no-code is getting more and more blended with artificial intelligence, and honestly, it's happening faster than most people even realize. The platforms themselves are just becoming smarter by the day. They're starting to suggest optimizations here and there. They can predict what you might need next, and get this, they can debug applications automatically. So where does all this leave us then? Well, here are the key things organizations and developers, for that matter, really need to keep in mind as we all try to navigate this AI coding revolution. First, embrace it and do it smart. This isn't something that's just going to go away anyway, but at the same time, don't just dive head first. Maybe start with smaller, not critical project to build up some experience. It's a good idea to have some guidelines, like for example, requiring a human review of all AI-generated code and using automated tests to catch any issues. As you work through the process, you will start to develop a real feel of what AI does and what it does not. Second, developers are going to need some new skills. Prompt engineering, which is basically the practice of talking to AI effectively, is becoming just as important as knowing a programming language. And never commit a code you can't actually explain to someone else. Third, education really needs to catch up. Computer science programs should absolutely be teaching students how to collaborate with AI, not just how to code everything from scratch. And finally, it's about balance. Let AI handle the repetitive and mechanical work, but keep humans in charge of the vision, the critical thinking, and the ethics. The best outcomes are when humans and AI work together, not one replaces the other. So, bottom line, well, vibe coding is here to stay. And yes, it will make development faster and more accessible. But real success comes from using it responsibly, not just blindly following what it generates. So the future is exciting, it really is, and we're heading toward a world where having a good idea matters more than knowing exactly how to code. So here's my challenge to you. Think about a problem you see every single day, something that frustrates you or someone else. With vibe coding, you might be the person who solved that problem. And that, I think, would be pretty remarkable. I'm Hamid Nach, and I'll see you in the next episode of eCompass.